Hey, what's up, YouTubers? It's me, Cameron, again. With jobs in the entertainment business, there is a would you rather style question of is it worse to have a career that never takes off, or to have a great career that takes a sudden nosedive to the point that you're not even well received anymore? I have no idea what the answer is, but it's in the latter category that we find people of the where are they now variety. But as far as career nosedives go, has there been any in Hollywood as head-scratching or colossally regressive as M. Night Shyamalan? Built up practically on entry, his movies began a slow but gradual downward nosedive with critics and audiences. In the early 2000s, Shyamalan was hailed as the next big director, with the hype of Spielberg, the suspense of Hitchcock, and a last name that was equally as cool, but even more fun to say, than Tarantino's. But you don't need me to tell you that's not the case anymore. And if you were to ask someone nowadays,
Hello?
what do you think of M. Night Shyamalan?
F him! And go f him because he f***ed up all this that's ruined.
That's pretty much the reaction you get. And while that level of extreme tends to come from people who we disappointed with an adaptation from a great franchise, which we'll get to, obviously, the vast majority of people still hold a negative opinion of him now. And then there are people like me, who are still desperately hoping that he can turn it around. Most of it I chalk up to missteps and decisions, some much bigger than others. As a fan of Shyamalan who acknowledges the guy's many screw-ups, I've held an interest in his career, and though it gets a little scattered in more recent years, there is a running pattern with his initial films coming in pairs of similarities. So, over the next few videos, taking a few films at a time, I'll be showing you my take on the immediate rise and slow fall of M. Night Shyamalan. So, where do we begin with this guy's career? His most well-loved and best-known movie? Well, no, but don't worry, we'll get to that one in the next vid. As I said, Shyamalan's movies tend to come in pairs. His first two directorial debuts I call the unknowns, starting with Praying with Anger. Dave, an Americanized student with East Indian heritage, is sent back to India on a college exchange program where he struggles with cultural differences, but soon discovers a lot about himself. This was an interesting movie, mostly due to its portrayal of cultural differences. Not only is it enlightening, but from an American's point of view anyway, it's easy to see why these new set of rules would be so difficult for anyone to adapt to. Once in a while I question them as they seem a little bit exaggerated.
Tell us something about America.
Yes. Have you met Michael Jackson?
I suppose that just goes to show how different they appear to an American, and I guess I could trust it since it's written by someone who went through this. Some people have called this film semi-autobiographical, which is partly true. M. Night Shyamalan has said that the movie is inspired by experiences of his own, but that the events are fiction. I did not quell a riot in India. For his portrayal of the main character, his acting is pretty good. I suppose it makes a difference that he's acting out of his own experiences. Everyone else's acting is about on par too. No performances really stood out to me in an especially good or bad way. Though at times I do have to wonder about the way his best friend Sanjay is written. At times he seems so wrapped up in his ethnicity that he doesn't notice the differences, and at other times he's fully aware of how different Indian culture is from America. I don't know, it just didn't seem consistent to me, but that's really my only big problem with it. The only problem I've seen other people say consistently about this film is that some felt it tried to cover too many ethnic factors in one movie. I can see how some people could feel that way if the movie was meant to have a well-defined answer about each element, but as it's addressing a culture as a whole, I think it makes sense to mention a lot of things as opposed to bringing up only a few differences while still referring to it as a big cultural thing.
It's pride, India's greatest attribute, also its biggest weakness.
The movie shows great filmmaking in its early stages. The story isn't one of considerable craft, it's a pretty basic plotline. Aside from its random moments of humor and religious undertones, there's nothing in this film that people would nowadays say is especially evocative of Shyamalan. There's no twist or thrills, but it's a basic story told well. The production values are obviously not that big, but for a first major endeavor, especially considering he was only 22 at the time, it turned out pretty well, and by taking some things into consideration, it might be among his best films. The second of his unknowns would be Wide Awake. Though his first major studio release, like Praying with Anger, not many people knew about this film, as Shyamalan still hadn't yet gained his popularity and his style hadn't taken form yet. A Catholic schoolboy named Josh makes it his mission to search for God when looking for answers after losing his grandfather. As often as the loss of a loved one is used as the background or the setup of a story, it's surprisingly not that often that it's the focus of the entire story, especially for a family film. Set mainly in a Catholic school, it hits a lot of the points that you think it should, comedy-wise. You know, kids asking the questions about hell that you hope they never ask, some corny Christian analogies, and they all work pretty well.
You ever think about God? We go to Catholic school. God's like our homework.
Occasionally, some of the dialogue may seem a little unnatural for kids to say, or for adults to say to kids, expecting them to comprehend it.
Could you join the football team?
We're physicians, okay? Trust us on this. You haven't been in an emergency room. You haven't seen a compound fracture or ruptured spleen or severe facial lacerations, okay?
Dad, I'm not going to war.
But what helps is that most of the time when that happens, it usually is funny, which does tend to make up for it or at the very least distract from it. Other times when Josh comes to certain conclusions, it's strange when how he says certain things sounds off for a 10-year-old, but it still seems perfectly possible that a kid his age would come up with them. Joseph Cross is decent enough as the lead child actor. He's a little whiny in some of the dramatic scenes when his voice sounds like it's getting stretched, but he's sympathetic and you identify with his struggle. Rosie O'Donnell playing a nun sounds like a joke in itself, but she was actually pretty good in the role too. Funny, but still genuine. While this one's able to cater to a younger crowd and has a more consistent humor amongst its drama, it actually wasn't too hard to tell that this was written by the same person who wrote Praying with Anger. Though there are still no major trademarks from Shyamalan yet, there's something of a surprise near the end from one of the characters, but it's not anything you'd really call a twist ending, at least not compared to his future ones. I'm not sure how much kids themselves would enjoy this family film, and yeah, that's probably the film's ultimate deciding factor, but I still think overall it's good. It brings up more questions about God than answers, but you get that that's kind of the point. It's about faith in times when there are no answers. It was cute, it had a nice moral, and dealt with some issues that's probably good for a family audience. I like it.